All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Simo?
More overthinking Wheel of Time, and we had promised to keep going on relationships. So we are telling the truth here. No, what we do for those that are uh, just coming onto the channel, or you've been around but you haven't listened to the Wheel of Time episodes, we use fictional characters to talk about real life events and phenomenon because Jordan was a very smart guy and he was able to, even if he wasn't trained in certain things, he was able to intuit a lot of things, as most of the geniuses of our past have done, and put it in fiction, and we can compare it to real life. So hopefully you can glean some knowledge off of this. And we're talking relationships. And if you want a relationship, or you're having trouble in your relationship, or if you want to keep a good one going, we're covering it all.
Yeah, and we've already talked about some of these relationships, but in watching that Korean dating show, Better Late Than Single, one of the things that came up on a number of occasions in reviewing that show was, all right, well, how do you take that first meeting and get a second one? Whether it's a casual meeting or an actual date, how do you get a second one? How do you keep it going if you want to? And so we talked about these relationships. You had the thought of, well, what about their first meetings?
Hmm.
And so we did a
Well,
little bit of that last time, and we're going into Rand here. That's why I've got Eye of the World here.
especially since we have kind of a weird time going on right now with dating apps and stuff, and it's getting even worse. I learned about this. I didn't know about this, but it doesn't surprise me. It was one of those, oh yeah, doesn't surprise me someone would do this. And then I had an experience in real life where it was similar to this, not me, but through a friend. But it was they're using AI to send the initial meeting message on Hinge and
Mm.
Tinder and all of that, and then they're responding with AI, and so they're letting AI write the conversation for them, and then they meet in real life, and it's like crickets, crickets,
Oh, geez.
crickets, because they don't know how to talk to each
It's
other.
it's the it's your first middle school dance. All the girls on one side of the room, all the boys on the other side of the room, because yeah, you don't know how to talk to each other.
Hmm.
Because all your friends have been your fellow gender classmates, teammates in sports and whatever. That's just who you gravitate to until you start to notice, oh, hey, maybe girls don't have cooties and aren't so icky. But then it's like, oh, but how do I do this? That's why in elementary school, when you first start to notice, you start pulling pigtails because I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's the old saying, "I'm
Oh,
sorry I
jeez.
roasted you. I was trying to flirt." You know. But so the real life one is I couldn't believe what I had heard, and that was on the Sex Doctors. If I didn't source it, they were bringing up data from Match.com,
Oh,
which
geez.
I should have brought that story because they released all the survey data they had, and it's really interesting. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on that. Not talking about these fictional characters. Maybe that'll be our next one, so we can have a happy episode, a depressing but happy episode on the social side. But uh, this real life friend, he was in a, I'll call it long term. It was 6 months. They were dating. That's long term enough.
I would call that long term. Yeah.
Yeah, and they broke up, and she sent him the last hurrah grievance letter, the Dear John letter, and he said, "So look right here. See that dash there and that dash there? ChatGPT wrote this."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "Oh, she used ChatGPT to do her Dear John letter? Come on."
So this actually a little bit of a sidetrack here because can't remember if I brought this up. I think I mentioned it when I talked about my first day of class, is that the professor, and this is an intro class, and she said we would be using generative AI in the class, that would
Mhm.
be part of our assignments
Some professors are
because,
embracing it. Yeah.
well, but specifically here because she said every legal firm she knows, and certainly all the big ones now, they all use generative AI to help with research and writing briefs.
Hmm.
And in Texas specifically, she said, I can't remember if this is law or regulation or bar association guidelines, but you can use, it is perfectly acceptable to use AI in assisting with your legal documentation and research and all that. You just have to cite it, cite what you used and what you used it for.
Hmm.
which I'm fine with. And so
Yeah, I could do that in my skill development class too.
our first assignment is she spent 2 days talking about emails. Um, One, because you need to know how to be professional with them, which most people don't, especially now, because
Because
kids
they don't
these
even
days,
punctuate these days.
well, they don't even email, they
They've learned
text.
English on text. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't even write an email, you just shoot someone a text and you certainly don't use full sentences there. So one, how to be professional, and two, there are legal ramifications like fun fact, if you forward an email from your attorney to someone else, you have just waived privilege.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to know that, and you need to make sure you tell your client that, and you need to make sure you don't put anything in an email that you wouldn't want somebody to see. You wouldn't want opposing counsel or the court to see.
Yeah,
So,
this is great. Not to slightly interrupt you here for the again first time listeners or anybody that listens to us every once in a while. We just added another layer. We've we cannot these are for educational purposes only. We are not giving you
mhm,
direct advice, but we just added another layer because now we're getting deeper into knowledge of the
yeah,
legal system. So
yeah. So tech,
we've got physiology, we've got psychology, now we've got legal system insight, and plus just grumpy old men who've lived a long
mhm.
time. So
So our first assignment with AI was take a note card, write a 3 sentence email on it with this information. I am your attorney boss. You are the paralegal. You are going to be out of the office on these days to do a deposition for this case. Write a professional email. Now take it home, go to any large language model of your choice, feed that into it, and then on the back, write what it spits out as an edit. And then, so the plurality of my last class was us talking about that, what we thought, how it worked, whether we liked it, what we liked, what we didn't like. And one of my main points was, and my wife works in tech, and she confirmed this. If you've seen the meme going around that something like 40 to 45% of large language model data comes from Reddit, that's true. And
oof,
about 20% comes from
oof.
Wikipedia.
Yeah,
And,
that was going to be my caution with using it for
mm-hmm,
like these breakup letters and stuff is because we brought up that they were trying to they were debating putting narcissism in the DSM-5 TR
mm-hmm,
because it's become the norm because probably and we can't prove causation, there's just correlation here, but social media has bent everything in that direction. I mean, this chat GPT message, I read the whole thing, was based on it was very nicely written. It wasn't saying that you're a narcissistic
mm-hmm,
asshole, but by the end of it, I was like, oh, you've read all the things that, oh, these are the 5 signs of a narcissist. And I'm like, well, everybody's got a little bit of that.
mm-hmm.
And or is that your perception of him, or is that what he is? Because I know him very well, and he can be that way in some ways, but y'all were also together for 6 months. So it
How
couldn't have been all bad.
how much of this was her girlfriend's in her ear and something we've brought up before, and I still can't remember her name because it's an Indian.
Chatwa.
Yeah, from Modern Wisdom, uh, 18 months ago or so, of stop getting your mental health advice from Instagram, I think was the
Hmm.
title of the
Yes.
podcast episode, and it was, oh yeah, she went deep into that of these 1 2 sentence affirmations and how they are so good sounding, but really they're sophistry because they're not only bad mental health advice, they are so often the opposite of
Well, I'll
what you
give a good
want to do
example. I
for
was
good mental
talking with
health.
someone about this the other day because they're always my clients are always curious about my classes or some of them. And so, the day after, like, oh, what did you discuss? Da, 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 da. And this one, it was actually something I had listened to, and this is where I got the information about the inside of the panel that was debating putting narcissism in there. And I told her about that, and she was like, "Oh, that's really interesting because." You see the skew and everything, but at the same time, how much of it is just normal, right? And I said, well, that's the problem with these clickbaity things, is they take something that exists and then they
Hmm.
apply a diagnosis to it, but there's a difference in the diagnosis and the one I brought
Yeah.
up, and I just thought of it on the spot. So, but was one of the traits of a narcissistic relationship for those that have looked at this is in the beginning love bombing.
Mm.
Love bombing is where everything just comes in and it's like one affirmation after the other, after the other, after the other, gifts, loving words, physical attraction, physical touch, da, 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 da. And then at the on the end of that, they start manipulating you and gaslighting you on a lot of things and it changes. The problem is that's the beginning of every honeymoon stage relationship. So how many of these were two people that have the brain chemicals going that nothing, there's no red flags, there's nothing wrong, everything's, I want to give you gifts. I want to do this for you. I want to be with you all the time. All of that. And then you get past that phase and you start getting to the attachment phase and sometimes that just doesn't lay in because maybe he's oxytocin what are they is it resistant or lacking or maybe she is
Hmm.
sometimes or there's just a mismatch and that's when the things that are not compatibilities for long-term relationships start to show up and that is perfectly normal. You should have that phase that is like, oh my gosh, we're just like really attracted to each other. And then it goes on, and then you find out if you're compatible to each other. Because one has to get it started. Relationships are scary. In nature, way back when we were developing, the first 150,999 years of our existence, relationships and sex and making babies made you vulnerable.
Hmm.
So we needed a physiological mechanism to get us going, and that makes us stupid. But if you just say, "Oh, he or she was overly affectionate and da da da," and then it just died, and call that narcissism, there's a grain of truth because they both look the same. The difference is the true pathological narcissist is love bombing you and watching you so they can use your reactions to manipulate you later. That's a big, giant distinction without a whole lot of difference in the surface level
Hmm.
appearance of it. So if you tell somebody about love bombing and manipulation, and they go through the standard relationship that just kind of dies off because you have differences, of course they want to feel like the victim because they don't want the relationship dying to be their fault. So now you're going to get a bias, cognitive bias that says, "Oh, well, he must have been this or she must have done this to me." I've got news for
So,
everybody. You can break up without hating each other.
yeah.
If you understand how the brain works or how your body works, you could just say, "Wow, it just wasn't right. It felt right, and then it wasn't."
Hmm.
And that's going to be the majority of cases because only like 2 or 3% of the population is actually pathologically narcissistic.
And there are actually some threads that connect here to what I wanted to talk about with Rand and his ladies, the
Hmm.
first meetings with his ladies. But let me finish my
Well, I got an interesting thought based on the AI and then men,
let me
but
finish the AI story here because one of the things I noticed, and my main point was, so when when I was writing essays in college, in both undergraduate and graduate, even though it was something informative, because of the subject matter, history, and the kinds of essays I was writing, I would still say the majority of my focus was making it interesting. So 60% interesting, 40% information. Well, this kind of writing, the kind of writing you do for the journal type article essays that you're writing,
Mhm.
it's way more inverted and focused on the information.
Almost
Uh,
unreadable.
yeah. So that was useful to me when it was just three sentences, so it was simple. And the first two sentences, it tweaked the language a little bit. It added a couple of things to make it more concise and the information more clear. And I was like, okay, I can see that. That is something that would help me. And that is something that if I handed it to someone who is better at writing technically, writing professionally, like we've got a mutual friend that's a high level blah 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 in a big company, and he does this stuff all the time. And if I gave it to him and said, hey T, does this sound right to send to a boss? And these are the kinds of things he would give back to me. This is a lot quicker and easier, and I don't have to bother him.
Mhm.
But my other point was the third sentence, the way we rewrote it. I didn't want to say this out loud because I didn't want to accidentally offend someone, even though it's not offensive. It's just fact. The third sentence was like it was written by a non-native English speaker.
Hmm.
It was like, okay, that's that technically works, but no person would speak like that. No American native English speaker would speak like that.
Hmm.
That is clunky and weird. And that is a problem if it comes to you're using that to send information, like to try and initiate and spark a relationship, and now you're sending stuff that's weird. And this goes in line with a point my wife made about large language models coming from Reddit. As my first thought was, well, what the heck? There's no way to know the provenance of where you're gleaning that information. There's no way to, someone can say they're an authoritative source and here's the answer to your question on Reddit, but you don't know. She had a bigger point that was more egregious, which is people post wrong answers on Reddit all the time for giggles because they think it's funny.
For the lulz,
And a
which has actually been connected to psychopathic behaviors. So
a
yeah.
code cannot tell the difference in tone. It doesn't understand tone. And that's a big thing that pops up here in Rand's first meeting with
Well,
Min
you'd
is
hope they'd
tone.
code in patterns because
Eventually they might be able
if
to
you know
discern,
somebody
yeah.
very well, you can tell their mood through text. Everybody says you can't tell mood or tone through text. If you know somebody well and
Yes.
you've been talking to them a long time, you know something's wrong through text or something's right through text because you have you're used to their pattern of language or if they're an emoji user, what they do there or any of
Yep.
those things. And then it just changes. Well, then you know something's wrong or something's right. Like I said, it could go either way. And so you can actually, if you know someone well, and the glory of large language models is they get to explore everything and they should be able to pattern things. But if they're not programmed to, then because you could program in someone who's just a contrarian for the lulz, right? You can program that in. So it just depends on the problem is the people who write
Mm-hmm.
this code have very poor social skills themselves. So they might not be able to pick up on it because theory of mind
Yep.
is not strong in very
How,
autistic people.
how do you code a large language model to discern tone if you can't discern tone? The
Hmm.
best you can do is give it a textbook definition, but life isn't full of textbook definitions. That's kind of what we've been harping on. Definitely last time, what I spent all my time harping on was Martha Beck's book of you need to engage that right hemisphere. You need both.
Well, maybe that's a place for people in my industry
Mm,
to have a place in tech as an advisory role in,
mm.
okay, these are the things to look for. Code that in. We don't understand that part. You got to code it in, but this is what you're looking for in this kind of behavior. I mean, we might be onto something.
Well, maybe. All right, let's get into
Get
what
into
we
the,
were
yeah.
actually talking about today.
Well,
Okay.
okay, so we're doing Rand Min first.
Yeah.
Is Min the chat GPT of this thing? Because she can see the future and
That's one of the interesting things here
oh, she
about
can
their
see the
first meeting.
pattern, as I was just saying. She can see the
Mhm.
pattern. Yeah.
So she is at a tremendous advantage because she knows way more in general than Rand does. She's more worldly, but also she knows more specifically because she knows who Moraine is. She has met Moraine numerous times. Moraine confides in her more than she would anyone else, in large part because she has to, because of the things she could see. And so she's going to end up giving Min information if for no other reason than because she needs to say, hey, what do you see around this person? Hey, do you see anything about this around those people? So Min is at a tremendous advantage in general, but then also we find out later she knows pretty much from the first time she sees Rand, I'm going to end up with that guy.
Hmm. Which is kind of a you say that as an advantage, but she hated it because she was living
Yes.
her best life. She thought this was her lot in the world, and she was being very successful at it. And got thrown on her head because she saw something.
Actually, that's a good point because I'm pretty sure when her and Elaine have that conversation in Saladar before the embassy goes off and she goes and Min goes with that the embassy they're sending to Rand is I'm pretty sure she says there, if not in several places, that nothing in her vision said that Rand would return her feelings.
Hmm.
So
That's right. That's right. I remember
that
that.
that's a big deal. So maybe it's not as much of an advantage as I thought. Well, except that the advantage she does have is Rand is completely out of it. The chicks are not on his radar right now. Not just because he's kind of sort of attached to Egwene still, but also all the crap he just went through to get to Barelon. Yeah, he's kind of preoccupied mentally. So she isn't on his radar at all just because that's not on his radar right now. So she does have the advantage of getting to feel him out, test his character without worrying about reciprocation, right? At least right now.
Hmm.
Because crud, I'm gonna end up falling for this guy. It's in the pattern. Ugh, do I even want to? What's that gonna be like? Who is this person?
It's like an arranged marriage.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's like an arranged marriage, and she's got to figure out, all right, well, who's this guy I'm fated to end up with? And it's not
Well, and she also
entirely
knew fated to end up with, but with also three other people,
t two other
two
people.
other people, yeah, to three total, yeah.
Yeah, so
Well,
she was
almost
gonna
three
have
other
to
people
share.
because Rand has the across generations bitter
Well, true.
ex-girlfriend.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then later he ends up with Alana in the back of his head as well. Um, that's my train of thought. What was I saying? So she's gonna have to share him. She doesn't know if she's gonna return his feelings. Um, so she's got to figure this. Oh, I remember what I was saying. Is this the reason this is useful, practically speaking, is because it seems so fantastical. Is we're in a fantasy world, and here you have a bit of magic, if you will. She sees the threads of the pattern somehow, so she can kind of sort of see the future to a degree. Um, but a lot of people have been in a circumstance where they end up having feelings for someone they weren't planning on having feelings for.
Hmm.
Or, oh man, I was just, I mean, there are songs about it, fooled around and fell in love. I was just out for giggles and crap. Now I have
That's
feelings. That
the a
complicates
romantic
matters.
version of F around and find out, right?
Exactly. It's
Hmm.
fooled around and fell in love. It's a classic love song.
And
Um,
there's physiology behind that.
mhm.
I
There's
I
also
just
on
wanted to
the
have a little fun, but we happened to cuddle after. Oh, that oxytocin just flew in there, and
yeah,
oh, dang it. Yeah.
the less happy song is if you can't love the one you're with is the title of the song. The lyric is if you can't be with the one you love, then love
Love
the
the
one
one.
you're
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, that's I mean, I guess so, but that's not very happy.
Well, the
But
inverse of that is the modern, just modern life, where at the tip of your finger on your phone, you have thousands of other people you could be with,
mhm,
and so if you're not quite loving the one you're with, just get on your phone.
yeah, which not a good yeah, get on your phone and then have GPT chat GPT give you a one-liner. What could go wrong
What could go
there?
wrong?
Well, the uh benefit to Rand here is that because he's not in that mindset of, ooh, hey, chicks, he is just naturally himself.
Hmm.
And so it actually helps him in the long run because he doesn't realize it, but her teasing is kind of her way of testing him. And Candace Warbucks talked about this, I think on trigonometry, that trigonometry episode that we talked about a while back, several months back, is yeah, women test guys, and if you're super neurotic and low self-esteem, that's really problematic because you're going to read into that. And it's no, it's just a hey, let me see, how he reacts if I do this. And it
Hmm.
it can be incredibly toxic.
I was about
And
to say if it persists past if there is no passing the test, then it's toxic.
it
The,
Lanfear, what we see in The Great Hunt
hmm.
with what Lanfear posing as Myron is doing, or Myron Selin. Uh, who's Myron? Brain. I don't know. Um, that is that kind of testing. That is the if you really loved me, you would do.
Hmm.
That is what she is doing. Min is just going. If I tease him, is he going to lose his temper? If I tease him, is he going to get all pouty? How is he going to react if I am me? Because this is who she
Yeah.
is.
Or a great one, if I joke with him, can he reciprocate?
Mm,
Because now you're testing intelligence.
yeah.
Humor, Gad said, I'll source this from who I got this from. Humor is the outward display of intelligence early in a relationship.
So this is chapter Strangers and Friends on page 234 of this newer edition paperback. Um, Rand's first meeting with her. Now he sees her talking to Moraine, and then Moraine and her both kind of disappear, and he's standing around lost in thought because he's been had a lot of crap go on in the past week or however
Yeah.
long it took him to get to Bearlawn. A shepherd with a heron marked sword, said a low woman's voice. That's almost enough to make me believe anything. What trouble are you in, down country boy? Startled, Rand jumped to his feet. It was the crop-haired young woman who had been with Moraine when he came out of the bath chamber, still dressed in a boy's coat and breeches. She was a little older than he was, he thought, with dark eyes even bigger than Egwene's, and oddly intent. You are Rand, aren't you? She went on. My name is Min. I'm not in trouble, he said. He did not know what Moraine had told her, but he remembered Land's admonition not to attract any notice. What makes you think I'm in trouble? The Two Rivers is a quiet place, and we're all quiet people. No place for trouble unless it has to do with crops or sheep. Quiet, Min said with a faint smile. I've heard men talk about you Two Rivers folk. I've heard the jokes about wooden-headed sheep herders, and then there are men who have actually been down country. Wooden-headed, Rand said, frowning. What jokes? The ones you know, she went on as if he had not spoken, or the ones who know say you walk around all smiles and politeness just as meek and soft as butter, on the surface anyway. Underneath, they say you're all as tough as old oak roots. Prod too hard, they say, and you dig up stone. But the stone isn't buried very deep in you or in your friends. It's as if a storm has scoured away almost all the covering. Moraine didn't tell me everything, but I see what I see. Old oak. Old oak roots, stone. It hardly sounded like the sort of thing that merchants or their people would say. That last made him jump, though. Uh, I don't know anyone by that name. What was it again? Mistress Alice did, if you prefer, Min said with an amused look that made his cheeks color. There's no one close enough to hear. Um, anyway, and it goes on like that for a couple of pages
Well,
where
that also exposes a little bit of and I think Jordan would put that in there purposefully, uh, her naivety as well. There's no one close enough to hear. Yeah, famous last words.
yeah.
Anybody
Well,
who's ever played Assassin's Creed, you get that little thing where you can sneak up and just sit behind the wall and listen to conversations, so you can get through it. The original one, it started to get crappy later in its development, but yeah, yeah, people listen to conversations and they find a way to do so.
mhm.
And we don't know if anybody can channel who could have listened via channeling.
Yeah, it's an example of not knowing what you don't know because she is much more worldly than Rand, and
Hmm.
she finds it amusing that he is trying to keep up this pretense, and it's like I already know who she is.
In fact, isn't that Moraine's talent? Listening in on conversations?
It is a weave that she came up with. Yeah.
Yeah, that was her little novice talent when we get a new spring where
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and she continues to use it. And people even reference it, Moraine's little trick. Um, so it is the possibility, but she's busy having fun because she knows more than this wooden-headed sheep herder, as she calls him, knows. And she is, I think, enjoying watching him blush and watching him um try to be worldly,
Hmm.
and he's not good at it.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is to his benefit. Uh, the fact that this is what people say about the place where you came from. Is that really what you're like? You know, are you going to be a pain in the butt to deal with? You
Hmm.
know, and he is to an extent, but I think she pretty quickly sees that, yeah, he's got a core of stubbornness, but it isn't stubbornness for stubbornness sake.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well, remember, he was also raised by the man who left. Yeah, he eventually came back and he had the same kind of mentality. But as I've talked about with genetics here in the States, how we are unique is we're the people that that sail west, my friend. We
mhm.
are the people that had that bug to explore. And as a whole, as a population, that does bleed down into who we are today, especially out in the more rugged areas like where we are at in Texas. So it's his he doesn't have the genetics of his father, but he has the epigenetic try not to abuse that word, but the epigenetic downstream effects of how your parents affect your modulation of your genes.
He does have the genes from his mother, no, though, because she did. When
Mm.
whatever Aes Sedai with the foretelling it was who
Yep.
told her
There's a
you
difference
got to
between
go
being
east.
forced
Well,
and
but she still did it. She didn't
yeah.
have to listen. She didn't have to believe.
Mm.
She could have found another way to do it, but she heard that it was imperative for the, sake of the realm and the future that she go into the Aiel Waste, and she did it
Hmm.
and stuck it out enough to become a maiden. So I mean, he's got some serious, both
Well,
genetic
and
and taught tough old oak roots.
I'll go a step further. His father, the Aiel clan chief, Janduin, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Janduin.
Janduin was a clan chief. And what do we know about clan chiefs in the Aiel? They have to be more open-minded than everybody else.
Mm,
Because if you're too rigid in your thinking, you do not pass the columns.
that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the stubbornness is there because he grew up in the Two Rivers, but he has this ability to take in the world and adapt to it from both genetics and the way his father raised him, being the one who had that kind of already propensity.
Yeah. And
Again, way over analyzing this, but intuitive, right? Jordan didn't know all that. In fact, I don't think at the time he wrote this, we knew that. So,
um it, it matters too because this is one of those threads that was making me go, "Oh geez," when we first started all of Rand couldn't do this if he'd spent all his time having ChatGPT talk to girls for him. And there was a precursor to that, believe it or not, for you youngins out there, which was, hey, go find out if she likes me or not.
hmm.
Okay, that is a thing that happened, still happens, but at some point you gotta jump in the water yourself. You can't just have your friend be your go-between all the time. It's uh I'll go back to better late than single. And our Tismy guy is he had a girl that they weren't interested in each other, but they could talk to each other, and they were a little bit of a confidant for each other of, hey, what's this person thinking? Hey, does this person like me? But then he still went out and talked to the person himself.
Well, I got a better example for the Chat GPT thing. We're talking about scripting, and this is
Mm,
early days of internet. Remember pickup artist culture?
yeah,
Because they would develop scripts and they would have the script that the pickup artist of their I guess they idolized, and they would kind of mimic that, and They basically would come up as a caricature of themselves. So they would come up as this fake person, and because they had this script that was known to work, they would have some success because I mean we're all similar in some ways,
Hmm.
and if there can be a formula that at least partly works for most people, and then they would get deeper in the relationship, and you can only hide for so long. You can only you can only act for so long. That's why we talked about politicians on long form podcasts because you can only fake it for so long.
Yeah.
And, 2 minutes on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC is different than 3 hours in front of, Theo Vaughn or Joe Rogan or any of these on Flagrant where they're giving you a hard time the whole time. Flagrant's a great example because there's a panel of people that are messing with you the whole time. And if you can't respond in kind on a dime to random crap, you can only fake it for so long.
Hmm.
And so the pickup artist is more like the chat GPT because you're back and forth from the chat GPT and then you meet each other. You can't fake it anymore. What do you say? She asks you something at the dinner table and you go, hold on. Yes, I do like long walks on the beach. My
Yeah.
phone told me so because
Which is why I was surprised because I hadn't heard this, but it's understandable that the incel subculture came out of the pickup artist
Mhm.
subculture
because they were
because
bitter.
the
Yeah.
pickup artist script only works for sneaky fuckers.
Oh no, it
Because
only work it works for sneaky fuckers, but it also works for just people who would have got the girl anyways.
yeah, or would have got the girl anyways. Because
Yeah.
the script, if you can run
Well,
the script long enough to hit it and quit it, then running into the glitch doesn't matter because you're
well,
you're not going to stick around that long.
but also there's a deeper part of that is it worked for picking up and hooking up, but a lot of guys do want to have children and settle
Mhm.
down and so they became bitter because they would get in these short-term relationships that always imploded. And so they weren't actually reaching their goal. They were getting the girl for now. And it was always you're not Mr. Right, you're right now. And that's on both that's on both sexes I guess I'm going to say responsibility because on the flip side, you got to know that there's a script going on. You got to be able to pick up on social cues. Women who grew up with brothers get sexually assaulted less than those that don't because they can pick up on social cues of males.
I didn't want to turn this into an Elaine bashing episode, but that makes me that the thought that popped into my head when you were talking about that is this maybe one of the reasons that we don't like Elaine because contrast what I just read with that very relatable, real back and forth between Min and Rand when they first meet versus when Elaine first meets Rand and oh, here's this literally hurt person. And Gawain compares her to she's always finding injured birds and squirrels and nursing them back to health. And so you've got this injured person plus, big dude, well above average in height and musculature. So he's got that going on. And oh yeah, as we progress into the scene, Mom and Elida don't like him. So how much of that first meeting, accidentally or on purpose, was Rand is a token to her?
Hmm.
Now, when they get together in tier, there is something more to it, but the tokenism I feel like just got elevated because now he's not just good-looking dude who who I got to practice my nurseness on, and mom doesn't like him, and holy crap, he's also the freaking emperor of the world, and I get to help him. He needs my help again.
Hmm.
And the way she acts with regard to their relationship, all the way up to Winter's heart when they finally culminate the relationship, is uh he's very much an accessory. And we've talked about this before about how it seems very political on her part. Yeah, there does. And certainly from Rand's point of view, I feel like we get more of he may be stoic on the outside, but especially once they bond, they can feel, oh wow, he has very intense feelings for us. Um, you don't really see that very much with Elaine going in the other direction.
Well, you see it a little bit in the Shadow Rising in their when they first start getting together.
Yeah.
Because when you hit that kind of honeymoon phase, the one thing you don't know is the other person because you haven't gotten to know them yet,
Hmm.
but you know yourself. And how can I impress? How can I do this? What do I need to be for this person so they will like me back? And so I got that impression from the Shadow Rising.
Mm. The interesting part on Rand's side
It's the
is
female equivalent, or it's the, I guess, politically minded equivalent, the upper class equivalent of the guy showing off for the girl.
and it's the 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 poor dork and the rich popular homecoming queen. So when they first meet, for Rand's part, it, something I do find interesting with this contrast of these two meetings that happen here before the first half of the first book of he meets the first two loves of his life is for Min, he's not thinking about her like that, and he doesn't for quite some time. He's when he starts to think about her, it's she was cool. I liked hanging out with her. She didn't make me feel frazzled. I miss talking to her.
Hmm.
With Elaine, it was almost immediately the unattainable popular pretty girl. Because she's a literal princess. He's a literal sheep herder. And so I do find that interesting that RJ, wrote both of these dynamics into this one character.
Hmm.
I think if you go back and you read through that scene where he falls into the palace, Rand, and that whole sequence, um, there's also the through line of what Min mentioned, which is the stubbornness, because he's got that solid core of this is who I am, and he does things there that impress Elaine because yeah, he's just a sheep herder, but he also has this heron marked sword. What's that all about?
Hmm.
And he's also kind of stands up for himself. I mean, you you're from a place that doesn't even consider yourself part of the country, but you just met the queen and you didn't flub it too badly. In fact, you were kind of impressive. So his ability to be himself
Hmm.
also impressed her in the same way that his ability to be himself, but for different reasons and in different ways, impressed men. I feel like do you have any thoughts on the Elaine bashing?
No, no. Other than what I put in there on the Shadow Rising. No, she's human too, right? I think part of it was the later writing of it because she became someone that was I mean, I hate to say it, she was supposed to be a hero, but she was kind of a
Mm-hmm.
power-hungry dictator.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was Jordan's intent or not, because we got a crossover of writers there, but it was. That's the dynamic of what she became. I would have liked to see more moments with her and Rand at the end of the series, but what we got was Avienda being the boss bitch and taking her turn. And
Well, that leads me to I don't have the book handy because I haven't gotten a new copy yet, and I've been giving my old copies to my son as he reads through them. Um, Avienda and Rand's first meeting, very different. And I think that was one of the ones why we had trouble talking about those two when we talked about their relationship is and one of the reasons I wanted to start with Min is because I think the interesting contrast there is how Min reacts to the being fated to be with this guy versus how Avienda reacts later
mhm.
when she goes through the columns. And it turns so with Min, there's a bit of frustration there, obviously, of what do you mean? What do you mean I'm fated? I'm my own person. Leave me alone. I'm
It's
living my
funny.
own life. And,
Let
and
me
Avienda is anger.
let me put these three together as tropes. So, Min, M-I-N, is the are we compatible? The joking
Mm,
around, the testing him, like you brought up. Elaine is the I can change him.
mm,
I can make him into what he needs to be. And Avienda is the I hated this man, but I've developed this curious respect, and now I actually love him. There's three tropes right there that we see with relationships. Because once he became the powerful ruler and she got her bun in the oven, she was kind of done with him.
yeah.
And Min kept the curiosity going the entire time. And Avienda, once she realized she actually learned to respect him and then felt less worthy, so she had to find her own worth
Mm.
in the world. So they could be equals. And so it's the three tropes played out in how they can be successful.
Yeah, and once again, I think the key there is Rand had just been canoodling with Elaine. He had finally cut cut the cord with Egwene, and he knew that was coming. Everyone knew that was coming. But all right, now we finally have closure, so that's done with. I've just got done canoodling with Elaine, and he doesn't have enough. There's no chicks on his radar again. He's just being him,
Mhm.
and he's trying to do something really important.
Which is
Which is
funny. Yeah, you brought in Egwene there, so there's a funny little section or phenomenon there too, because we talked about rigid thinking with people. They were, we're going to call it small f, fated to be together in the two rivers.
mm,
It was human fate. The dad and mom were in agreement. The whole town was in agreement. All the friends and family and everybody was in agreement. They were fated to be together, and they were both, they're both high performing people. As we see as they develop through the
yeah.
books, they become the top two people in the world. But they were human fated to be together. But life comes at you fast,
Mm,
and life takes away your ideals. The ideal was they're going to be the power couple of the two rivers. And realistically, they could have been the power couple of the world. But that's not what was best for the world. And because we live in a metaphysic of fate in this world, life came in and said, "No, that's not the way it's got to be. That's the way it looks like it makes sense to you humans, but that's not the way it's got to be because you're too human to understand." Which is where rigid thinking gets you in trouble because life always messes up with your rigid thinking. If you
yeah.
plan everything, uh, look at some people that plan vacations. They're like at 10:45 we're going to do this and at 11:30 we're going to do this and we're going to have lunch here and it's going to end at 1:30 and we're going to and those people get driven absolutely mad by one little thing going wrong.
again, this is why I love music because a good lyric can say so much so i- in such a short space. Bonnie Raitt's "I Can't Make You Love Me," you know, uh, you can't make your heart feel something it won't. Here in the dark in these final hours, I will lay down my heart and I'll feel the power, but you won't. No, you won't, because I can't make you love me if you don't. Um, and it's the way I interpret the song is it's someone who has been noticing this for a while and is just now accepting it and
Mm,
realizes this is our last night together. This is over. This isn't going
mm.
anywhere because I feel way more for you than you do for me. And uh, uh, you know, how many people have wasted how much time butting their head against the wall trying to make a relationship work that just isn't going to work?
Yeah, and this is that has a lot of underlying things that can change it because your first question if things are going wrong is what can I do? That's the healthy response. If that's not your response, maybe we start talking about that pathological narcissism again. All right. If your first response isn't well, where is my responsibility here? And actually, you can include in that where is my focus here? Do I even want this to happen? Right.
Yeah.
And the second part couldn't be, okay, I do. I've been doing these things, and that's healthy. If you, this is the healthy part because the unhealthy part is you stay there. You never leave there. What can I do better? What can I do better? What can I do better? That's unhealthy. It's a good start. But then the okay, so I am doing all these things, but it's still not working. Now we got to go to like the works of David Buss or whatever and say, okay, is he actually trying and I just don't get it because cross-ex mind reading? Maybe we just need to figure out where the gap is between what I want and what he thinks I want and what he wants and what I think he wants. That's that's the other healthy part. But then there's the third answer, and this is where a lot of people stay in the unhealthy part is, oh, maybe this is the way it is. And that's what you said, the next step, where
Mhm.
she has taken that, made that conclusion that, oh, okay, I am doing all these things. This is how I feel, and it is not the same on the other side. The
Mhm.
problem is the cross sex mind reading in there is sometimes that's where friends and family come in because the old what you said, go talk to her for me. Well, maybe sometimes you need the
Mhm.
the brother-in-law. So I'm using female because we brought up a Bonnie Raitt song. Okay, so the brother-in-law saying, no, that's not what he feels at all. He tells me all these great things about you all the time. You know, or the other way around. Or and so then you can bridge the gap because oh, he does feel that way. Now we got to figure it out. Or you got a confidant that says, oh, no, 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 he's pretty checked out. There you go. And if it's just not working, now you got to figure out what's worth it. Okay, we have a family together. That's one thing. We have all of these things together. We don't want to get in a sunken cost situation, but also it's complicated. It's very complicated.
Yeah, because it involves human beings, and we have
Exactly.
trouble
Well, okay,
understanding
yeah,
our own selves.
and back to your I think your original point with that is you could want all day long, but there's two people involved, and
Yeah.
that's where the to parallel that to with my life has different plans versus what your plans were. Uh, well, I have these plans, but the partner I chose to do it with was not on the same page.
Yeah, or you may have experienced this or had a friend who I've had a number of friends who they had literal checklists of, you know, this is my type and like specific things of I want a person who, is like this physically, is like this personality wise, is like this whatever, intellectually, blah blah blah. Like checklists and then end up with someone who just barely checks any of those boxes
Well,
because
that's
that's how.
part of the problem because I think this is a growth thing that is being messed up by dating apps is you should have some sort of a checklist. because you have standards. That's what we call standards. I
Hmm.
have, I mean, by definition, no, it doesn't have to be checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. It could be like, well, I want a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Or do you say, I just want a well-rounded person?
Hmm.
Or I want someone who I can talk to intellectually, or well, I want somebody beautiful. That's fine too. All of these things, you can have your ideals, but then back to your right brain, left brain things, you have to be open to feeling something for something that doesn't fit on that list. And I think we were going to talk rigid thinking next time.
I was just about to bring that up. Yeah, because you'd mentioned that, and that's a big deal. Is the probably the through line for all of Rand's relationships, especially right at the beginning when he first meets them, is first getting to know them. Later, when Min comes back and he's getting to know her and realizes, oh, this is going somewhere different. This is more than just friends, and and the key thing there was his openness,
Hmm.
trait openness. He did not have rigid thinking. And to their credit, Avienda's the only one who comes from a culture where sharing is acceptable. And yet Elaine and Min are like, well,
But
if,
again,
you know,
bringing back Avienda, you talk about her culture. They seem rigid because it's very black and white, survival or not.
mm,
But the difference between the chiefs and the wise ones is they have to accept things they don't want to hear.
yeah.
And it's so, and it defies their culture so much when they see it that the people who don't make it have killed themselves in the process.
Mhm. Yeah, the rigid thinking, let's touch on that briefly, and then I think we'll have get into it in more detail next time when we talk social political stuff. Because I think this is important in general, and since we're talking relationships, is so technically speaking, because you'd sent me a text that rigid thinking is highly correlated with mental health
Hmm.
issues. So technically speaking, what do you mean by rigid thinking?
Mm.
Is there a technical definition of that?
Let's do that in the next episode.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Because rigid thinking is a colloquial term that's used in the profession, whereas you could go into traits and but yeah, rigid thinking, and I'll have to get the literature together, how they defined it, so that we can settle it down into what's in
You
the
know, a,
literature.
a
Yeah.
good a good example might be, since we're talking Wheel of Time and talking relationships, and we talked about this last time, is look at Perrin and the way he treats Fail. Initially, it's no, go away. I'm on a mission. You're a distraction. You shouldn't be here. And initially, he is very mentally rigid when it comes to Fail, and so he's trying to push her away. Very similar to Avienda, how rigid her thinking is of, wait, no, my friend who is friendly enough has become near sister, told me to look after you, and now I'm fated to fall for you and dishonor myself. I hate you.
Well, I'll give a good example. If you are very rigid in your thought, and so a great profession for you, if you're highly intelligent, rigid in your thought, would be an engineer. You could be working at a turbine at Shell here. Okay. Something like a hundredth of the width of human hair can throw a two-story turbine off. That's a great profession for you. Because if I put X, Y, Z, beta component together exactly in this way, everything will work. And it does. If it's put precisely in its little spaces and you keep that from happening, everything works fine. But if you have that same way of thinking and that same intelligence, and you decide to work with people, you're going to go crazy. because I'm going to, oh, I came with this diagnosis. I came with this treatment, and they don't respond to the treatment. Why didn't they respond to the treatment? Now you're going crazy. So, I mean, I've seen this actually in professional people. So, if you're a very rigid person, first of all, we need to address that because it might be bad for your mental health, but we also need to find the right place for you. So, you probably need to work with things. Whereas if you are a very open-minded person, you can probably work with people. The difference between complicated systems and complex systems. The problems with AI. The problems with AI, why it still doesn't, even though it can pass a old school Turing test, doesn't mimic human life, is because it's computers. It's a thing. It's not a person. It's a complicated system. It's not a complex system. We have these uh, human factors is the kind of the direction you go in psychology, and they treat the brain like a computer. And every time they get it wrong is because they treated the brain like a computer. Rigid thinking versus non-rigid thinking. Now, if you do that in your own life, okay, here's the great one. We're talking relationships. Say you were successful. You had the meeting, you dated, you married, wife. So you're the guy, wife, two kids, two and a half dogs, picket fence, everything that was supposed to be the American dream of getting married. And your wife gets a little bored. And we have Facebook and Instagram and all of these things now. Start seeing like, oh, things are nice outside of my picket fence. I could be in Aruba. Why am I not in Aruba? Why am I not in Milan right now? And then she starts getting disgruntled. All of a sudden, he comes home from work and she's not as receptive as she was when he does. And that throws a monkey wrench in. And if you're too rigid, you're going to keep going through life in this pattern instead of identifying and addressing the issue at hand. And your marriage dies and you dissolve, and now you become an alcoholic and you die an early death with your kids hating you. Okay. So complete mental breakdown because you were too rigid to make a change or to even identify the problem to begin with.
An analogy I thought of when I was reading Martha Beck's book is this is why we have word problems in math,
Mm,
because it's
that's
not
great.
enough just to know the equations. You
Hmm.
have to be able to apply them. So if you have very rigid thinking, you would argue with your teacher, no, 7 plus 7 equals 14. Why did you mark this wrong? Yes, 7 plus 7 equals 14, but look at the problem here. It tells you 7 and 7, but notice here it's telling you to take away 2. So the equation should have been 7 plus 7 minus 2 equals 12. No, 7 plus 7 equals 14. No, no, listen, read the problem, analyze the problem. The problem says to take away 2. No, no, 7 plus 7 equals 4. All you're doing is looking at the equation you wrote down. You're not taking in all the information.
We have
That's
a
kind of what Beck is talking about with engaging that right hemisphere so that it and the left hemisphere can work together as they're supposed to.
we have a great movie, classic movie for anybody younger in the audience. The how excessive rigid thinking leads to dysfunction. It's called Rain Man.
Mm.
Great movie. Tom Cruise, Dustin
Dustin
Hoffman.
Hoffman, yeah.
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman. Wapner at eight. Wapner at eight. Wapner at eight. When Wapner wasn't at eight, he melted down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the extreme example of how overly rigid thinking leads to dysfunction. So it's that perfect, great movie. It's a great example. I like the because that's the first thing that popped in my mind when you brought up the word problems. It's no 7 plus 7 is 14. No. Wapner at eight.
Mm-hmm. All right, so to wrap things up and to bash the series, which we haven't done in a while, we have news on that. Um, this was one of the things we ranted about from the very beginning, and it's not just, oh, why is there this you know, lesbian love scene between Sawan and Moraine. That's not in the books. No, it was because it was so clunky and awkward and terrible. And that was every relationship in that series. And so there's a channel I watch called Echo Chamberlain, and he's got mostly short videos. They're usually 10 to 15 minutes, and he does literary critique. So he looks at these shows, and he also talks about books. And this is something he's been harping on a while, of not just um, television series and movies, but even in literature, romance is dead. People don't write, and it's becoming increasingly clear it's because they don't know how to write romance, because they don't know how to do romance in their real lives. We brought up when we were first talking relationships of it. This surprised me because I didn't remember ever seeing this. Is Robert Jordan, one of the genesis of the idea of Rand and his three girls, is he had two girlfriends at once at a time in his life, and they knew about each other. They planned their dates of, okay, I'm going to go out with him here. They did the planning, and that was kind of the genesis of the ideal way of doing it. Is I'm going to go out with him on this weekend, you get him next weekend, kind of deal. And he thought, oh, if it works for me, why can't it work for a whole culture? And so that
Hmm.
was, when the guy lived a life, okay, and then ended up, you know, married to Harriet for 30 years. I think they were married before he died. So he knew how to write people because he had been around people. He knew how to write romance because he had been involved in romance. You know, extreme example that makes me laugh is I think I've mentioned before Undertaker, uh, Mark Calloway talking about how one of the problems with the way they do young wrestlers now, and they put them through this training academy, is he used this specific example. I had to bounce to make ends meet because when I first started, I wasn't getting paid much. So I know how to sell a bump, as they call it, because I know what it's like to be stabbed. So if I get color, as they call it, when you stab yourself to make yourself bleed, I know how to sell it because I've been stabbed, is what he was saying. It's Christopher Lee complaining to Peter Jackson, Peter, do you know what it sounds like when a man gets stabbed in the back? Because I do. These people had lived. The people who are the young people who are writing these shows and these books, they have not lived real lives. Socking it all the way back to where we
They
started,
learned
it's
about it
getting
in the
worse
academy.
now.
Yeah, they
They
learned
they
about it in school.
learned about it in school, they learned about it online, and now to make matters even worse and accelerate the problem, they're not even interacting with anyone with each other virtually because they're having a large language model generate their responses for them.
Hmm.
Yikes. And this is why every relationship in that series wasn't just not like it was in the books, it was just awful.
Hmm.
It's just the only one, the only relationship that came close to being something human, no shocker here, finding out later that it's because uh what oh geez, the made up warder, Alana's warder,
Maxon.
Maxon.
He's not a made
What?
up warder. It's just not what he was in the books. He was
Yeah,
the
I don't know
the
why they
the new
changed the
head
name.
of, yeah, he was the new head of he took Hammer's place in the tower in the books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Alana had two warders, and for some reason Tomas was one of them, and I can't remember who the other one was. Um,
Ivan.
Ivan, yeah, and one of them was killed by the White Cloaks.
I thought Tomas was Varen's.
She, you might be right. Anyway, point being, that was Rafe's boyfriend. That's why he got such a big part. That invented out of nowhere, and why their story was so big. But their story in season three, one of our complaints about it was distracting from the main story, which is Perrin and the two rivers and Perrin and Fail. But on the other hand, it was the only thing that had any emotional resonance. So that was the only thing approaching like real human beings in a relationship dealing with difficult issues and still trying to deal with and be with each other. Everything else was awful. It was shallow. It was hackneyed, it was tropish, pick your word. It didn't work. And you're
Owen was one
seeing
of her
why.
warders in the books that
Owen,
was killed, and
that
Ivan is the one that lived.
okay. Owen was the other
Well,
one.
technically, and Rand.
And so yeah, technically and Rand. Um, so it's not surprising then that we have news on the
Oh,
Wheel of
yes.
Time.
This
Um,
is actually good news.
surprising to me. Uh,
For those that are just watching, it says Sony and Amazon relinquish rights to the Wheel of Time.
which when we talked about this when it had been announced that it was being canceled, I was certain that it was too lucrative of an IP and that Amazon was going to sit on it until it got close to expiring and then put something else out in order to retain the rights. Either try again or maybe do like they did with the animated Lord of the Rings movie that they put out on Prime, is maybe do like an animated new spring just to retain the rights, something like that. So this is very surprising to me, and it makes me curious then what's going to happen with the rights. Um, is someone else going to take a stab at it?
I think it's partly going to do with how much iWatt thinks it's worth. Who can afford it?
Well, that's true. Um, I'm also curious because I haven't dug into depending on the contract, it might not just be Harriet's decision because Tor might have a piece of the rights as well.
Oh, I bet they do. I mean, this is one of the funny things about the whole Neil Diamond thing with I'm going to leave Spotify or whatever. He didn't even
Yeah,
own his own music.
yeah.
Blackstone owned his music, or BlackRock, one of those, owned his music. And of course, they were politically impacted by what was happening on the Rogan show. They're the ones that pulled the music from Spotify and made him trot out there like a good little soldier and make his little statements. He didn't own his music. I mean, credit where credit's due. That's where Taylor Swift like fought the man is she got her music back.
Mhm.
She just re-recorded it with minor changes and
The article you had there was making the point that, you know, presumably the rights owners are going to want to tap into that revenue for Wheel of Time beyond just continuing book sales, and that even though it was a failure, the Prime series at least exposed the work to a wider audience. You know, how wide, who knows? How many people who didn't know about it find out
theoretically it was
about it?
successful for the first season.
Yeah. Um, and enough for them to do 3 seasons before saying, oh, okay, that's enough throwing money at that.
Mhm.
Um, they
Well, I
they
think the third
mentioned
season was their gamble was we're going to try to do better to the book readers, but the problem was the damage had been done.
that article mentioned video games, which I'm kind of surprised isn't something that's been tapped into
Mhm.
previously.
Well, especially they have a model with the at least the second and third Dragon Age games because it is like a weave. All the magic is like a weave, and that was the hard part about the original trying to adapt it to video games was making
Mm.
it true to the material, but making it magic, you know?
Video games also seem like a good way to explore the world without tapping into the story,
Hmm.
directly, because you can either do something like what Lord of the Rings Online does, which is you are telling a story that runs parallel to the main story of the Lord of the Rings books.
And it just so
Um,
happens it ends up with a major event that helps the main thing happen.
or since you
Yeah.
have so much history here, I've always wondered why in the world doesn't someone make a Trolloc Wars game?
Mm.
Because there's very little source material there, so you've got a lot of room to play, but you're still in that world. You're still tapping into that world. You're still
You
tapping into that audience.
and you can even have dirge storylines with Eridol and stuff. So that would be cool.
Yeah. So something like the Total War Warhammer games, you know, you could either do it that way for an RTS type of game, or you could do a hack and slash games, like kind of like the Vermintide games, where you're a small group hacking your way through hordes of Trollocs. That would be fun, and I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened. That maybe that will be the silver lining that comes from the series. As much as we didn't like it, if it exposed the world, expanded the audience, and made rights holders and potential rights buyers say, there's a there, and we can do it better than those people did. Maybe we'll at least get some of those kinds of things to play around in this world, uh, rather than just endlessly overthinking the books as we have been.
All right. Well, I think that closes us for this episode, and we'll be back on Wednesday. We might talk rigid thinking. I don't know if there's anything in the news we need to talk really,
Ugh.
but yeah, I think the rigid thinking that helps with all the other social things because
Mhm.
realistically, political polarization is a form of rigid thinking. Because the more you shift to one side or the other, the more you align your thought with everything you hear to that side, which is again rigid thinking because you're predicting instead of hearing and seeing and feeling and all of these things. So yeah, I think that'll be a good, not light subject, but a good, intellectually stimulating subject.
All right, we will see y'all then.
All right, later.